Hello, ChurchOne. Hope you're all doing well. I want to start this message with asking you a question. What is the most ridiculous trend that you have bought into? All right, fashion trend or something you got into. I know what it is for me. For me, it was Jinko's pants, okay? Those are the pants that we wore in the 90s where the pant leg was as wide as the waist. And it looked ridiculous. It was like you're wearing two big dresses on, one on each leg. And I look back on pictures of myself where I pretended to be a skateboarder, but I wasn't very good at skateboarding, so I just kind of dressed the part. And but what is it for you? If you grew up in the 80s, I know you have some ridiculous pictures, okay? No offense. So here's a question for you. Why do we buy into those fads? Like, what was it about it that made me make the decision to spend too much money buying something that really looked like a costume? And obviously it's trendy, it's popular, but it really has everything to do with the people around you. And so I have a question for you. How often do you consider the power that relationships have over you? I mean, they've got to be pretty powerful if they can make me do something like that. And I'm sure we all have examples of things that we've done because of the people around us. And so today I want to talk about the power of relationships. I look back on my growth as a person, and so much of my growth and maturity is tied to relationships that I have in my life, the context of my marriage or my kids or my closest friends. Relationships have the power to transform us more than anything because we are created for relationship. You know, the first thing that makes a baby smile, other than a bowel movement, but a real smile, is eye contact. Eye contact or the voice of a parent, a loved one, right? That's the first thing to make a baby smile. If you're ever trying to make a baby smile, just eye contact and a smile, and it'll make the baby smile because we're created for relationship. When God created us in Genesis chapter 1, the very first thing that he did is he spoke to us. If you read the creation account, when he creates things, he kind of talks in the third person about them, right? He says, He creates the birds and he says the birds will increase in number, or he creates the water and he says the water will teem with life. But when he creates us, he says to us, be fruitful, increase, and multiply, right? He enters into direct relationship. We're created for relationship. And because of that, relationships have power. And so today we're going to talk about our relational connection because we're going to talk about our relationship with God and the transformational power it can have on us, and how I think that we can often settle for a transactional relationship, which is not what I think God has in store for us. So we're going to read Psalm 90. It's the one psalm that's attributed to Moses, and we know a lot about Moses, right? We know his life, so it's cool because it gives a lot of context to this psalm, right? He was born a Hebrew, but was raised in the Egyptian palace, and he saw miraculous things, miracles, the burning bush, the parting of the Red Sea, all these amazing stories. Of course, ending his life in the desert before they entered the promised land, but he led God's people. And so we have all that context as we read Psalm 90. So let me say a prayer for us, and then we'll read God's word. Father, thank you for today. Lord, we recognize that the power in this message is in your word. And so I pray that as we read it, we would not just read it, but that we would be changed by God, that we trust that your word does not return to you void. So be with us now. In your son's name, amen. Psalm 90. Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turned people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. Yet you sweep people away in the sleep of death. They are like new grass in the morning. In the morning it springs up new, but by evening it is dry and withered. We are consumed by your anger and terrified by your indignation. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. All our days pass away under your wrath. We finish our years with a moan. Our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures, yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. If only we knew the power of your anger. Your wrath is as great as the fear that is your due. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Relent, Lord. How long will it be? Have compassion on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all of our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, for as many years as we have been in trouble. May your deeds be shown to your servants, your splendor to their children. May the favor of the Lord our God rest on us. Establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. So, thank you for reading that whole psalm with me. I want to point out 3 observations about who God is and how those characteristics impact who we are, how we see ourselves, and how we relate to God. So the first one is that God is eternal. It says that he is from everlasting to everlasting, that he is their dwelling place for all generations. Before the mountains were born, you brought forth the earth. And so what he's saying is that God, before anything that we have seen existed, God was God. From everlasting to everlasting. Do you have a place that when you go, you're just reminded of how big God is or how small you are? And maybe both of those things. For me, it's the ocean. I grew up going to the beach. I had the opportunity for a little bit of my adult life to live close to the ocean. And when I get there now, I just take a deep breath and I think about God's faithfulness to me throughout my life, every time I get to go to the beach. And that's what it is for me. What is that for you? For Moses, it seems like it might have been the mountains. And that's what's cool is we remember that Moses wrote this. He was wandering in the desert for 40 years. Now, we don't know when he wrote this, but we know for a long time of his life, he was walking around the Lebanon mountains. And so as he looks at these mountains, he's looking at them, he's like, before these mountains even existed, God, you were running the earth, that you were the one in control. So how does the fact that God is everlasting to everlasting, that he's eternal, how does it change us? Well, it humbles us to the reality that we are temporal, and that humility leads to wisdom. Later in the psalm, Moses says, teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Wisdom is different than knowledge. Knowledge is knowing something, being aware of the facts, while wisdom is allowing your learning to change the way that you live. Wisdom is being skilled at living. It's aligning yourself with reality. So the recognition that God is eternal and that my days are short frees me from the temptation to build my life, my little kingdom, to just be as impressive or as successful as possible. It makes me want to say, Lord, you're the one in charge of the greater kingdom of all of eternity. How might you use my life and invite me into be a part of your kingdom, into something that could outlive me? There's a great example of this from the 1800s, a guy named Alfred Nobel, who was a chemist and an inventor. He invented dynamite. And when he invented dynamite, he invented it with the purpose to help with mining or building tunnels through mountains. But eventually, dynamite got weaponized, and it started to be used to shoot cannons or used to make bombs for battle. And interestingly, in the later 1800s, Alfred Nobel, his brother, passed away. And after his brother passed away, then Alfred woke up, he grabbed the newspaper, and in the newspaper was his obituary. And somebody got confused and thought it was Alfred had died instead of his brother. And so Alfred had the unique experience of picking up the newspaper and reading his own obituary. And you know what it said? It said, Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite, the inventor of an agent of death, responsible for killing thousands. And he had this moment of clarity of saying, this is going to be my legacy. This is what people will remember I gave my life to, is inventing something that ultimately led to people's destruction. So what he did, knowing that his days were numbered, he was able to live with wisdom and humility and say, I want to give my life to something that's going to outlive myself, which is being aligned with reality. Being skilled at living is being aware of the fact that your life is going to end. And so he said, I'm going to take all of my fun, all of the money that I made from making dynamite, and I'm going to create a fund. And we are going to give a prize, an award away for the person who makes the biggest contribution to humanity in the sense of peace and flourishing. And he called that the Nobel Peace Prize. And now 150 years later, we still every year give out the Nobel Peace Prize. And now when people think of Nobel, Alfred Nobel, we don't really think about an agent of death or dynamite. We think about the Nobel Peace Prize. And I think that's pretty cool that he had a chance to redefine his legacy because he had wisdom given to him in that obituary where he said, wait a second, Lord, teach me to number my days. I only have so much time here. What can I give my life to that would outlive myself? The most obvious examples, if you have children, right? Or if you're running a business, you want to give your life to something, give to a charity that's going to impact other people, regardless of if you're around to see it or not. And that's called living with humility and living with wisdom. And so when we recognize and remember that God is eternal, it helps us do that. The second observation is that God is powerful. And saying that God is powerful is kind of like, yeah, well, that's pretty obvious. But here's the question is, how does God's power impact the way that we live and respond to him? The natural response when something has an uncontrollable power beyond our understanding, is fear. And we see it in this passage. It says, who knows the power of your anger? For your wrath is as great as the fear that is due to you. Now, I want to spend a little time on this because I think the idea of God being angry and us fearing God is an uncomfortable image for us. We'd much rather talk about the God of forgiveness and the God of love, but we also can't ignore it because it's talked about enough in the scriptures. And it can be confusing because you have God in the Old Testament who says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of understanding. And then you have Jesus in the New Testament that says, do not fear, follow me, trust me. And so which is it? Should we fear God or should we not fear God? And so the first thing I want to do in kind of reconciling those two things is this. God didn't change his mind. He doesn't change. He doesn't change from the Old Testament to the New Testament. And Jesus, as it says in Hebrews chapter 1, is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being. He is the full manifestation of God, the visible expression of the invisible God. So that means when Jesus gives himself to rescue us, it is the full revelation of the heart of God. The same God that tells us to fear the Lord, and that's the beginning of understanding, is the God who fully revealed himself by sacrificing himself for us. So where does fearing him fit in our relationship with him? Well, first we have to understand that when Scripture talks about fearing God, it's not being scared of God. It's a different word than that. Tim Keller explains it this way. He says, the Hebrew word for fear has overtones of respect and awe. Fear in the Bible means to be overwhelmed or controlled by something. You see, fear isn't bad. It's just incomplete. The fear of the Lord is beginning of understanding. It's the beginning of understanding of just how big and powerful God is, that he is the one in control. You see, in the early days of Jesus' displaying his power, it was also met with fear. Remember when Jesus was walking on the water, his disciples were fearful. When he calmed the winds and the waves, remember the disciples were afraid of the storm. And then Jesus stands up and he calms the winds and the waves. And then it says the disciples were asking each other, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him, right? In the face of the power and being exposed to the power that Jesus had. And then it says, and they were terrified. You see, it wasn't the fulfillment of their understanding. It was the beginning of their understanding. They were just starting to understand Jesus is different. You see, the fear of God is the beginning of understanding, but it's not where Jesus wants us to stay. It's not where he intended us to live in being fearful of him. It's the beginning of understanding, because then you see at the end of Jesus' public ministry, the most obvious demonstration of his power is his resurrection from the dead. And how does his disciples greet him? Well, Peter jumps in the water and swims into the beach so they can have breakfast. That doesn't sound like a fearful response. You see, early in their relationship, fear was the beginning of understanding. And then as they matured in their relationship, now the demonstration of power was met with adoration and love. Because a relationship rooted and motivated by fear was never where God wanted us to live. You see it in Genesis 1. When God created us, he was walking in the garden with Adam and Eve. This is before there was sin. It wasn't until after we sinned against him that we hid and that we were fearful of him and we were worried about getting in trouble. Living in a fear-based relationship is a lot like a teenager who, out of being afraid of getting in trouble, will obey what his parents say, right? And so he doesn't want to get grounded or he doesn't want to lose his phone, so fine, I'll listen to you, right? But that's not the ideal relationship for the parents. The parents don't want to take your phone away. Like, they bought you your phone. They don't want to ground you. They want you to go be with your friends. So why are they making these consequences up? Well, because a fear-based mentality can have really concrete results, that people know the consequences of what happens if they don't do it, so I'll obey. But what they would way rather prefer, the parents would rather prefer, is that you trust them and that you would know that they love you, and out of your mutual love for them, that you would listen and obey. But if you're not at that point of maturity, then it will have to be out of fear that you make decisions to avoid things that might lead to your harm or somebody else's. Similarly, right, if we don't love God, then it would still be in our best interest to fear him. I think what's sad is that many of us let our relationships with God kind of stay in that fear-based mentality. And while we might not live fearfully, we do live in a way that we feel obligated to do things because we're afraid of the consequences that will happen if we don't, or we're hoping for the good consequences if we do, right? And that is what I mean when I say a transactional relationship with God. So, sorry, one sec. So for many of us, our faith in God started when we heard the message of believe in Jesus and believe in what he did for you, and if you don't, you're going to go to hell. And that message is like, well, geez, I guess I better believe. I don't want to go to hell. And while, sure, okay, that's a pretty powerful motivator, it's not transformational. You see, fear only motivates somebody as long as the consequence is real. The consequence has to be strong enough, right, for it to work, and you have to believe that it's present. Meaning this, as soon as you think that you can get away with whatever you want to do, and the consequence won't be there, then your true colors are going to show. Okay, so when the fear is gone, we will expose what we're really about. So now you have this faith in God that's completely motivated by obligation, keeping whatever requirements you feel like God has laid out to ensure that you get to heaven. And let me tell you, this is not what I think Jesus meant when he said, I came to set you free. I came to bring you abundant life. I came to give you the water that will make you never thirst again. Remain in me and you'll have a fruitful life. Come to me and you'll find your rest. Does that sound at all like a fear-based relationship? You see, love is a motivator that transforms. Love for someone is when you do things to bring them honor and glory, even when they're not around. Meaning, when I go on a business trip and my family is not around, my thought isn't, oh, I better be a good husband, because if I don't, I'm going to get in trouble when I get home. No, my thought is, I want to love and honor my wife even when she's not around. You see, my love for my family has actually changed who I am and the way that I live. It's not me trying to be a good husband. It's me trying to love my family and being motivated out of a love that I have for them. So that's why the second observation that Moses recognizes the power of God, that can't be left in isolation. It has to be coupled with the third observation, which is that God is compassionate. It says, have compassion on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all of our days. You see, God is all-powerful, right? He is, first, eternal, right? He's eternal, so it makes us live in humility and with wisdom. And then second, he's all-powerful and all-loving at the same time. You see, if fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, then God's love is the completion of it. It leads to satisfaction and singing for joy and being glad all of our days. Doesn't that sound a little closer to the life that Jesus promised? That word satisfy is powerful. God's unfailing love is the only thing that can satisfy us. Again, another reminder that it's Moses reading this. And do you remember how what they woke up to every day in the desert, right? They'd wake up to manna on the ground for them to be able to eat for the day. And when Moses wrote this, he didn't say, satisfy in the morning with your manna. He says, no, satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love. The manna he provides is part of that, but the true satisfaction comes from God's unfailing love. So here's a question for you. Where in your life are you feeling unsatisfied? Where do you find yourself thinking, I just need a little more and then I'll be good? And there's nothing wrong with having goals or ambition, but where in your life, if you're honest, you'll always just want a little more and you're not looking to God's love to satisfy you and say, Lord, you're all powerful, you're in control, and you have my best interest in mind. You love me, so I can be satisfied. You know, again, in the creation account on the seventh day, I love that God rested. And I love that because it's not like he got tired. Like, have you ever thought about that? Why did God rest on the seventh day? He wasn't exhausted and needed a break from creation. Like, God doesn't get tired. You see, he took a seventh day to be satisfied. He finished on the sixth day and he said, this is great. I'm going to take the seventh day to show them the life that I want them to live, which is being satisfied, no longer having to strive, no longer having to perform, right? Satisfy us in the morning when we wake up. Lord, I want to live my best life, but I don't want to do it trying to satisfy myself using other things in this world to find it. You are the one who satisfies us. And then I love it because the last verse says, and bless the work of our hands. You see, he makes all these observations about God. God, you are eternal. Teach me to number my days and live in wisdom. You are powerful, worthy of our fear, yet you are compassionate, willing and able to satisfy us and lead us to sing for joy all of our lives, every day. And with all of those things said, now bless the work of our hands. See, now we live our life. And I think that sometimes we get that backwards. We're like, God, bless my work, help me do good, I'm trying to do right, and we get it all about what we do and how we perform, and then it's like, and God, yeah, I know you're in control. And it's like, no, just fix your eyes on him. He's the author and perfecter of your faith. He loves you. He's an all-powerful and all-loving God at the same time. And now, with that said, you say, Lord, satisfy me in the morning with your unfailing love, and now bless the work of my hands. Let me go and be a part of your eternal kingdom. So that's your encouragement for this week, ChurchOne. Bless you and see you around.